everyone, Ripley with Bob's Watches. I'm here with Brandon, Director of Vintage, and today we're talking all about the history and evolution of the Milgauss.
Before we get into it, should we do a little wrist check?
Oh, absolutely.
What are you wearing? I could guess.
I got the memo. It's a Milgauss
Nice.
116400 GV, the anniversary variant, so black dial, green sapphire crystal.
Nice.
How about yourself?
I've got on the 6541, so one of the OGs. This one's really beautiful with the tropical dial. The Milgauss is turning to a little pink.
Absolutely
It's got the
beautiful.
smooth bezel.
And in my favorite configuration with oversized smooth bezel. But we'll get into all of that in a bit. So Brandon, today we're talking about a really fun one. One of my favorite, one of the most quirky, a tool watch, not a sports watch, even though that can kind of get used synonymously,
like
but
that.
the Milgauss.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk going on with the Milgauss right now. They just discontinued it. There's a world record set for a vintage one at auction recently. So it seems like a good time to chat about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of the black sheep in the Rolex canon because it's not as sexy as the sport watches. You think about race car driving, deep sea diving, polar exploring, all of that's pretty glamorous. And then the Milgauss, it was made for scientists, medical technicians, cool professions, lucrative professions, but not quite as exciting, although very much purpose-built and arguably more purpose-built from a, this was made to fit a purpose than many of the other watches, like say the Explorer 2, for instance. Which is usually the one I point to as a very purpose-built watch for spelunkers.
Right.
But I guess let's just start at the beginning. So
yeah, so it looks, here we have a Rolex 6541. Rolex officially came out with the Milgauss in 1956, but they were kind of making them a couple years before,
Yeah, it was with like the Swift Lab CERN, they needed an anti-magnetic watch. A lot of people don't realize magnetism and electricity are one and the same, and so it's not like you have to be standing next to a giant refrigerator-sized magnet. There's lots of large current things that can ultimately magnetize a watch.
Right.
1954, 1956, they're experimenting with them. 1956, we get the 6541.
Yep.
There's also the 6543, which is, there's less than 100 of those.
Yeah, that's like the officially first reference.
Prototype, for lack of a better term.
Right.
And then we get the 6541, and it was available, originally it looked more like a Submariner.
Right, the original had the rotating bezel, and then they came out with the smooth bezel, which was for the US market.
Yeah, and it wasn't a big seller. It had that quirky lightning bolt shaped seconds hand, honeycomb dial.
And it's kind of big. It was kind of big for the time.
Yeah,
38 millimeter,
Yeah, we're talking when 36 was the norm, and even that was large and oversized. So yeah, it was a big watch and kind of a weird flashy one.
Right.
It was popular among race car drivers.
Yeah, interestingly enough.
And then that leads us up until the 1960s. 1960, we get the 1019, which it's boring compared to the original one. I mean, you could get it in either a silver or a black dial. But here there's no lightning bolt shaped seconds hand. It almost just looks like a super-sized, kind of sporty version of an OP, but it made sense why this wasn't a big seller for them either.
Right.
But also Rolex being reactionary.
The black dial is a little more sought after than the silver in the collector community.
I love the black dial. I love the way
I like
it
them
looks.
both.
And then there's also the CERN dials where it was basically the silver dial model, but without any luminous material, which the scientists wanted that for the, because the radioactivity might disrupt some of the more sensitive equipment. And then that brought us all the way up almost to the end of the 1980s. Those watches more or less stayed the same. Small variations, but by the time we get to 1988, when that model and the Milgauss temporarily was discontinued, this was such an outdated watch by 1988. 1988, we're talking the introduction of the 3135. Most watches have sapphire crystals at this point. And then we've got here the 1019 chucking around with basically the same thing that was present in the beginning of the 60s. And so it made sense why they discontinued it. It wasn't a hot seller for them. They weren't pushing the envelope further. It was still just as capable, but it wasn't doing much.
Right, and they tend to sit. We've talked to a lot of collectors who have bought these back in the day, and they were just telling us how they sat for a long time, and they got them pretty cheap, and it makes sense why Rolex would just nix the line.
Yeah, it wasn't what they were doing at the time. And by the end of the 80s, we're thinking, digital's all the rage as far as the general public. And so this kind of tech watch in terms of the lab, but totally outdated in terms of its technology, made sense. And then it sat dormant all the way up until 2007.
Right. Then they came out with the 116400, and the white dial was the first, right? Or was it both?
All three together.
Oh, they did all three together. Yeah, I think, I used to really like this one the most, the green crystal, but I think I like the white the most now.
The white's now the most unique. I mean, when they brought it back, you can kind of see how they were like, okay, the 1019 was too boring.
Yeah, they went directly back to the original.
Yeah, they swapped red for orange pretty much, and then brought back the lightning bolt seconds head, now fully finished orange. But it's also a much larger watch.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's definitely, what's it, like a 40? It's like
40
a 40
mil, significantly thicker.
Yeah.
And then there was the anniversary edition, two black dials, one of them which had a green sapphire crystal, which Rolex says was so difficult to produce that they didn't bother patenting the technology to do a green crystal.
I didn't realize that.
It's the only one that doesn't have the little Rolex laser etched insignia, which is kind of interesting there. But, either way, it's the only Rolex to ever feature a tinted sapphire crystal. Still is, even though it's no longer in production.
Yeah.
And then in 2014, we get the Z Blue Milgauss, the 116400 GV, and that replaced both of the clear crystal versions. So instead of having two black dials and a white dial, we now have just the black dial with the green crystal, and then the Z Blue dial also with the green crystal, which now has all blue glowing lume. And that was just kind of how things remained all the way up until, this past year when the Milgauss got discontinued entirely.
Yeah, so no more Milgauss, so all of these are discontinued now, which is...
The whole collection, and it makes sense. We were saying it for years.
Yeah,
like it almost became a running joke. How many years is this watch going to hang on?
Right.
It was one of the last models to have the 3135. Everything is getting so anti-magnetic that what was its real thing that it was bringing to the table. And when you look at what other companies, even Tudor, are doing with their anti-magnetism without having a soft iron inner cage. The whole the underlying technology of the Milgauss was really something that dated back to the turn of the mid 50s here, and so it was outdated. Do you think we're ever going to see a return of the Milgauss?
I think so. I mean, why not? I think Rolex they probably have a plan in so many years. They'll just bring it out again, and I hope they'll bring it back to the 6541 style, maybe with a rotating bezel. That would be sweet, and circular lume plots. But just comparing these, it's like you can see the K shape is pretty similar. Obviously, it's all rectangular lume. This is circle and triangle mix, which I do like more. It'd be nice if we get some interesting hands. The lightning bolt better stay.
Lightning bolt needs to stay.
Yeah, a honeycomb dial would just be a home run, and I would also like to see the orange go back to red, or maybe both. Why not, right?
Bring in a new color.
Yeah,
yellow,
new color.
Yellow, some other bright pop or something scientific.
Or green. That could be crazy.
Or more green crystals. More green crystals. I'm a big fan of the 116400 GV. I think they're really cool watches. Just green tinted sapphires cool in general. But I'm with you. If they bring it back, go back to basics. Rotating bezel, make it feel more like a tool watch. And then no soft iron inner shell at this point.
They could just have the
whole
Metas
movement.
Exactly. They probably do Metas, right? What Tudor does, right?
Yeah, and at that point, let the Milgauss once again, now well over 50 years after, come back and showcase Rolex's entirely new generation of fully anti-magnetic movements.
That would be cool.
Will it happen?
Who knows?
Hopefully. Look, how long do we have to yell about the Cellini? And we didn't really get it. We got the 1908 anyway. So still, we'll keep hopeful.
Yeah, you never know. They just came out with that Daytona with the Paul Newman-esque style. So anything's possible.
Yeah, we have seen Rolex acknowledge their past more in recent years than ever before. Do you have an all-time favorite Milgauss?
It's got to be the 6541. I go back and forth between smooth and rotating. I'm on a smooth bezel kick right now, so I think something like this is probably my favorite. What's your favorite here, you think?
I'm honestly, I like the new ones because they're quirky and weird, but if I'm going to get one, it's got to be the original, the 6541.
Same. So what's your favorite out there?
What is your favorite Milgauss? Or even among the 116400s, we've got two black dials, a white dial, and a blue dial. Do you have a favorite among these? And if so, why?
Yeah.
And also, do you think we're ever going to see the Milgauss return? And if so, what is that going to look like? And when is it going to be?
Yeah.
Rolex notoriously moves slowly, so we're talking about it now. So maybe by the time I'm retiring.
Yeah, maybe by the time I have my son has his own kid, we'll know.
Yeah. Well, that about wraps up for the history of the Milgauss until we get a new generation of it. Tell us which one's your favorite, and if you know, if you don't have a favorite, what you hope to see in the next generation. Until next time, take care.